Hello everyone, this is MiniCoder back to give you another tutorial on the series of Basic Programming 101. We left off last time talking about properties and within a method along with private variables and how they all intertwine together. This episode, we're going to talk about primitive variables and reference variables and how they interact and work very differently. One thing that I think is valuable to go over before we discuss these is the concept of scope. So, scope is anything that is within a set of curly braces, or I call them squigglies, but curly braces. That includes if statements, switch statements, while loops. I know we didn't go over all the statement types yet. That will probably be the next video. But just to give everybody an understanding, we will go into more of scope when we do the different statement types. However, to understand the fact that certain things do travel past the scope and don't, anything within here is within one scope. Everything within here is one scope. Everything within here is its own scope. So one thing I gave as an example is you'll notice that this and this are named the exact same thing. However, you notice when I'll double click on this, Visual Studio will highlight anything within the file that is the same, not of the same type, but the same memory space or the same variable. Okay, so you notice that this is highlighted. However, this is never highlighted. Why? Because this is a parameter of this method. So that is within this method's scope. If I double click on this now, it's going to highlight this, because this string val, which has the same name as this, is within this scope. So scope is very important, because if you don't keep track of your scope and you make everything public, or you make everything you make everything in different places with the same names, you can very easily think that you're referencing something and you're really not, or the value has changed and you don't realize it. Now notice I said the word reference. Now with a reference type, which is any type of object, a cat, the dog, even the animal, even though you can't do that up, is a reference type. Console right here, that's a reference type. Anything that inherits from object, which is the top level of all things in .NET. Anything like that is a reference object. And what do I mean by a reference object? So a reference object, when it gets passed around, like here I'm passing of type cat, and you can see the highlight there of cat. When I pass something through here, even though I'm not passing it back because this is void, that reference here is the same reference as here. Now I know it's not highlighting because it doesn't know for sure ahead of time that I'm going to reference it. Because this could be any cat, it doesn't have to be this cat. Okay, and if you notice this cat, now it knows that it's at least that cat. Alright, so I named them the same. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the program. I put a breakpoint at each end of this so that you can see what happens. And then I will highlight these so that we can see in the quick view, the quick watch, what each thing does, what the outcome is. Okay, so the first thing we hit is we're inside of the primitive type method, right? Now if we highlight over string val, int val, and float, all of them have the values of what we set it to here, right? If we hover over these, as far as it understands right now, they are one and the same, because all the debug knows is that it's of the same name. But once we get out of this scope, it's going to be a whole different story. So let me step over. Okay, so now we're back outside. Now you'll notice that everything is back to the defaults that we set here. Why? Because they were only set within the scope. Now, let's go back to cat. So we instantiated a new cat, and if we look inside, age is 0, name is null, speed is 0. Once we go inside of this method, we're going to see that we're setting the cat.name to be equal to Rebecca. So when I hit continue, okay, so now we're going to see that when we hover over cat, the name is no longer null, it is Rebecca. And if we were to hit continue and stop it right here, you'll notice all of these are still back to their default, except for when we hover over cat, you'll see that the name did propagate. And the reason for that, again, is because when you write into these, when you get in here, although this is the same name, it is a whole different referencing a whole different memory stream or memory block. Okay, you really can't get down to the memory blocks because this is a much higher level programming language than something like C or C++, but just trust me in the fact that this is a completely different memory space. Even though it's got the same name, names don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. However, when you pass in a reference type, the reason it's called a reference type is because you're passing in the reference. It knows, the compiler knows it's of type cat, and that's how you can do things like cat.name. However, because it's a reference type, you're passing over the you're passing back and forth the reference to that same memory block, and it's proven right here by the two methods. So just keep that in mind. If you're using any of these three, there's a few other primitive types: double, decimal, long. I think that's it. Oh, and bool. If you're using any of those, then you're going to want to return something if you need that value, or you can use something called out. I don't recommend using this, but there are situations where you may need it, and there's other ways too, like tuples. I don't want to get into that right now. But if you needed to out, actually, let's do this. Let's do out float. Okay, so we're going to out the float value, so whatever this is, and we have to also say out here. Okay, so we're going to send this value in and tell it to out that parameter. Well, when we do this, you'll notice we hit this breakpoint. Float is 0.23, and if we, let me just make sure that we're gonna hit it right. Let's go again. Okay, so now we're outside of both methods. If you hover over float, there you go. There's your 0.23, and that's because we outed it. So outing it means that you are gonna want to give it that value. Now, I will preface this by saying by the time it gets out and sets to this, I can double check. However, I am almost positive that by the time it gets here, the compiler at the machine level has made this be a new memory space, because you can't every time you redo like a string, every time you change the value, a string is just a array of characters, and every time that you change those characters, the string is rewritten into a new memory space. So just something to keep in mind. So that's about everything I'm going to go over today. Just so everybody's positive on the primitives we have, there's decimal, which is similar to float. So 0.9. Okay, the big difference here, the literal type cannot be implicitly converted to type to use the M. Okay, M. There you go. Okay. So the main difference between the decimal and float is the size. They're both of decimal, but there's a nth degree that each one goes, and in most applications that you're probably going to deal with, unless it's financial, you'll probably be able to get away with a decimal or double. You probably won't need a float. And integers are only whole numbers. String, as I said before, is an array of characters. Character, a char or a character, is just one one character, which C equals, which is denoted with the single quotes as opposed to the double quotes, and bool. So a bool is a boolean that is either true or false. So true keyword, you would either say true or you can say false. Very often, if you're like making a connection to a database, you'll return a true or false to say whether it connected or not. That's a good example. There's endless reasons to use a bool, but that's a good example if you're looking for a quick example of what those are. So I think the next, let's see, we've done properties of classes. We've done differences between get and set, and we've just done that. So I think the next thing we're going to work on is statements. So statements, I'm not going to go over right now. It'll be in my next video, but that'll be something like an if statement. There's while loops. There's do while loops. There are switch statements. I think that's about it that we'll probably go over. So until next time, that is probably what we're going to go with next. But I hope this was informative as far as the difference between primitives and references. And just like always, if you have any suggestions or need any clarifications, please don't hesitate. If you like it, feel free to do a thumbs up and subscribe. If it's a down, please feel free to give me a thumbs down. But if you can, please give me some feedback so I know how to make it better next time. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.